You got to learn how to move from regret to rejoice. The definition. Divine blessing in the Bible is always physical and spiritual.
Welcome again, everybody, to the C3 podcast. Again, I'm Minister Robert Webb, and I'm here with our pastor and master teacher, Dr. Earl Grant Jr., and we're continuing the conversation of unshakable wherewithal. Now, in the first, I'll say, installment of this unshakable wherewithal, we were talking about Isaac and how he had the wherewithal to bless his sons, Jacob and Esau. Before we get into today's episode talking about Jacob and him blessing Joseph's sons, can you just give us a reminder of what a blessing is?
Yes. Well, so we talked last time, we talked about divine blessings in the Bible in particular, because as I pondered and thought about this some more, the word blessing has been hijacked so much in our culture that we say blessing for everything. Yeah, everything is a blessing. So, but in the Word of God in the Bible, divine blessings, I stated, includes both physical and spiritual, and it does this because it is fixed upon the reality of the fullness of life in the presence of God. So a lot of stuff that we say is a blessing is not a true biblical blessing because it does not reflect the fullness of life as God would have us live in his presence.
So I get a new car. Is that a blessing in a sense?
Is that a divine blessing or is that just a general blessing? Because the Lord lets the rain fall on the just and the unjust. He let the heathen drive a car. He let the drug dealer drive a car. he let the follower of Christ drive a car. So
Okay.
So he said, how do we view blessing from God's perspective? Am I fixing what I have received in the fullness of life in God's presence?
I see.
And so, I always use the example of, and I thought about this when people, basketball players in games and stuff, and they after the game and said, they made a great play or they made a great stop or whatever, and they said, the Lord blessed me. I just thank the Lord for blessing me. What if you are a Christian and you made the shot, you said that's a blessing. But if the person guarding you is a Christian and they didn't stop you from making the shot, were they not blessed? Anyway, I just throw that out for food for thought because you had how you view it. It still could be a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, my defense was on point, but you made the shot. Okay, great shot, but I'm not blessed less because you made the shot.
That's good. So would you say that since you talked about athletes, could you say that their position or status could be a divine blessing if they are viewing it from the lens of I have status, I have wherewithal and resources to impact the kingdom with what God has given me the wherewithal to do? Could that be then a divine blessing in a sense?
Well, I would say it's viewed of how am I viewing the fullness of my life in God's presence in this moment. Because even in a loss, God is still blessing me. What we view as a loss.
Yeah.
We lost the game. But I'm still able to be blessed.
Right.
And I'm still able to show others how to be blessed, even when things don't go as well as we think they ought to go.
Yeah. I was more so talking about, how an athlete, when they get drafted and they know they're gonna make a multi-million-dollar contract, and they say, well, I thank the Lord for blessing me with this contract. That could be seen as just a general blessing, because there are people who are making a lot of money in the entertainment industry that aren't followers of Christ, right?
Yeah.
But for someone who is a follower of Christ, could that be looked at? And I know I'm getting off, but I just want to ask this question: could that be looked at as a divine blessing, because God has given me status? He's given me these resources. He allowed me to sign this multi-million-dollar contract, and now I'm looking at my life through who He is and who He's created me to be, and the resources and the wherewithal He's given me to impact the kingdom and be a blessing. So I was saying,
Yeah.
could we view that as it being a divine blessing in that sense?
That fits the definition. Divine blessing in the Bible is always physical and spiritual.
Gotcha.
So the athlete got a physical blessing of this contract, but it also has a spiritual meaning because it's fixed upon the reality of the fullness of his life
Right. Gotcha.
in the presence of God. So how am I going to now use this
Gotcha.
in all of my life,
How am
the
I
totality of my life, in God's presence for His glory and to make kingdom impact?
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure we right there. I'm picking up what you're putting down. And then today in this episode, we're talking about Jacob. In verse 21 of Hebrews 11. Y'all should know where we at by now. We've been walking down Hebrews. We've been walking down Hebrews 11. So verse 21 says, by faith, this is the New Living Translation version. By faith, when he was dying, by faith, Jacob blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on the top of his staff. One of the interesting things to me about this particular verse, it says, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. Now, for those who don't know, who may be watching this podcast, who is Jacob to Joseph?
Jacob is Joseph's father. And Joseph is the son, well, the firstborn son of the wife that Jacob worked 14 years to marry.
He worked hard, brother. He worked hard.
He put in some time to get her, but it just showed Jacob was he ran into a trickster, Laban, who was better at it than Jacob was.
I was about to say, we had just talked about in the last episode some deception going on and some trickery going on.
Yeah, so you got to be careful. There's always somebody.
It's always ingredients for a mess. I tell you.
But anyway, so he's Joseph's father, and Joseph has been subjected to some ill treatment by his brothers, and he ends up in slavery and all this stuff down in Egypt. And then they finally get the family back together, and Joseph has now married, and he has sons, and Jacob, he has 12 sons too. But anyway, he takes the time to now bless Joseph's sons. So those are his grandchildren. And it just shows that generationally we need to be about passing on blessings, not only to our children, but passing them on to our grandchildren. And we need to do things with them to be a good grandparent, not only a parent, but when you have grandchildren, be a good grandparent.
So what are some of the things, and again, I like this verse because it's showing that Jacob isn't blessing his son. He's looking to the generation after his son to be a blessing to his grandchildren. What are some things that grandparents, and you are a grandfather, what are some things that you want to pass on to your grandchildren when it pertains to blessings? What are some of the things that grandparents should be passing on to their grandchildren?
Well, you ought to pass on the love. Yeah, that's off the top. But you ought to pass on faith, the faith that we have in God, because that's ultimately what's going to last.
Mm.
Pass on the truth of God's word. Pass on, relationship, the importance of relationship. You need to embrace them. Pray for them. We talked about all this in the message when we were doing it. How you need to cover them with prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Be a example for them, a personal example, and present the word to them. And we talked about how the different ways in which we interact with our children or grandchildren. And we said that preschool, they're shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Elementary, they're taught. As teenagers, they're directed. And as grown children, they're advised.
You know, one of the interesting things about the time that we live in now is that, and this was probably true when you were growing up too, some grandparents have had to step into the role of being actual parents. Um, can you, I guess, talk about that kind of dynamic, and would it be the same thing that, you need to pass on to your grandchildren, although you've been the one that's been, raising them and taking care of them, their entire life?
Yeah, but the blessings of these things doesn't change.
Mm.
It just may be the dynamics of how you do it and the time and interactions of when that takes place. If they're living with you, it's every day. If you're seeing your grandchildren periodically, then it's not as dynamic all the time. And so it doesn't change what you do, it just changes the methodology by which it's done, the timing of it, the interaction.
What do you think is the reason that Jacob, when he was dying, thought about blessing Joseph's grandchildren?
One of the reasons is because, first of all, Joseph is married to an Egyptian. So you got this mixed marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jacob is showing his children, because he's going to bless them later on in the next chapter, actually, in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to bless his sons. But he is actually adopting Joseph's sons. He's bringing them into the family.
The family, I got
He's
you.
letting everybody know they are
A part of the blessing that has been
gotcha. They are part of the family.
They're a part of the family.
So they're not outsiders.
Mm.
And so we as family have to bring people
Talk about
into the family. We have to let them know that they're not outside. We're blended, but we all family. So yes, they part Egyptian, and
yeah,
but we all family.
And Jacob is making it known that although that there are some mixed cultures here, because Joseph is my son, I'm letting it be known that all of his children are a part of this much larger family and are a part of this blessing that has continued to be passed down.
Yes.
That's
So
good.
It's all family. We all family.
That's good. And I would even venture to say that there are some people who have not been brought into family to understand that they are a part of this blessing that has been passed down. And as we've been going through these episodes with Unshakable Wherewithal, it's allowed me to think about I'm not a gatekeeper for the blessing. I don't get to hoard it for myself and those who this ain't VIP access. This has already been predestined. God has already given the instructions, as we saw with Isaac. This is already set. So what I'm telling you to do, it needs to continue to be done. And I believe that some people, I don't want to say miss out on the blessing, because God can find you wherever you are. They don't really understand the blessing because we have not brought them in.
Yes. And he brings them in, and he lets us know as we wrap up that in life, you got to learn how to move from regret to rejoicing.
I know we ended. You can't leave us right there.
So
talk about that real quick.
So Jacob was at a point, when you read the story in Genesis, he was regretting, and he was grieving, and he was going through all these things. But he had to come to the point of understanding that life is still going on. There's still reason to rejoice. You coming to the end of your life, but you still got reason to rejoice. You got grandchildren that you have an opportunity to see and embrace and hug and love on and pass on to. You get to see your son that you thought you wouldn't see ever again, and now he's here with you. You still have reason to rejoice in spite of the regret. And we all live with regret, but we still got reason to rejoice.
There's nothing else I can say after that. We appreciate y'all being with us on this episode of the C3 Podcast. We will see you next time.
Well, hello, and thank you for joining the C3 Podcast of Covenant Community Church. We are delighted and excited that you chose to be with us today. And if you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with us, we invite you to go to our website at mycovenantcc.com, fill out our virtual connection card, share your comment or your question, and I promise you we'll get back to you as soon as possible.